Today, is there more inflation waiting in the wings? Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, Web Notice Post, covering finance and private news with a distinctively Australian flavour. Today, what I want to do is to look in detail at the ABS data relating to the middle activity across the economy. On one side, you have raw inputs. On the outside, you have consumers and businesses buying stuff. But in the middle, you have various activities where products are taken and value is added before it's sold on and passed on to other people to be converted into more value-added components and outputs before they're ultimately sold on. So this activity in the middle wedge of the economy is critical to understand at the moment, particularly as there's some very, very strong metrics still lurking below the waterline, which signals potentially much higher inflation than many expect ahead. So let's look at what the ABS said in some detail today. Well, the ABS released their producer prices indices today, and that contains a range of producer price indexes for the Australian economy, comprising mining, manufacturing, construction, and services industries. Firstly, final demand, excluding exports, which rose 0.7% this quarter and 5.8% over the past 12 months. The Australian PPI measures the price changes of products, goods and services as they leave the place of production or as they enter the production process. This price change is measured from the perspective of the industries that produce goods and services, whereas other measures, such as the Consumer Price Index, measures price changes from the consumer's perspective. Final demand measures the price changes of products, goods and services consumed, but with no further processing. For example, sugarcane is a preliminary product and uses an input into the production of raw sugar. In turn, raw sugar is an intermediate product which is then used to produce the final product, refined sugar. Final demand captures final products destined for final consumption with no further processing. And the main contributors to quarterly growth in final demand were the output of building construction up 1.6% due to ongoing supply chain disruptions for imported products, coupled with high demand for finishing stage materials and skilled labour shortages. Input prices to house construction increased 2.2% in the December quarter, reflecting a range of increases in plywood, glass, plasterboard and carpet. Suppliers are passing through increases as sustained activity in the residential construction sector continues to place upward pressure on finished stage material prices. High fuel and energy costs have also contributed to the material price increases this quarter. Over the past 12 months, input prices to housing construction rose 14.2%, and input prices for house construction rose in line with rising input costs and sustained demand for finishing stage building materials. The main contributors were timber, board and joinery up 2.1%, driven by cupboards and built-in furniture up 5.6% due to supply constraints for plywood and increased glass prices. Other materials are up 3.1%, driven by plaster products up 3.3%, and that was due to global gypsum prices and high manufacturing and freight costs. Concrete, cement and sand rose 5%, and that was driven by ready-mixed concrete, which is up 4.8%, due to increased costs for sand, cement and aggregate, coupled with high demand from the construction sector. Offsetting the rise were price falls in steel products, down 2.1%, driven by steel beams and sections, which were down 2.7%, and that was due to reduced steel costs, improved supply conditions and lower shipping costs. Electrical equipment dropped 0.3%, driven by electrical cable and conduit down 1%. That was due to decreases in global copper and PVC prices and lower input costs. Capital city price movements, by the way, territory prices are not sampled, came out with Sydney up 3.1%, driven by timber, board and joinery at 5.4%. Melbourne up 1.2%, driven by plumbing products up 4.1%. Brisbane up 2.8%, driven by other materials, 7.8%, and Adelaide at 1.9%, driven by other metal products up 3.9%, with Perth up 2.5%, driven by timber, board and joinery up 4.2%, and Hobart up 1.9%, driven by timber, board and joinery up 2.5%. Building construction prices rose 1.6% this quarter and 11.4% over the past 12 months. Growth in the output of the construction industries continues to be driven by a shortage of skilled and unskilled labour, high freight costs, and ongoing supply constraints for finishing stage materials. Increased activity in the non-residential market, coupled with ongoing pressure from the residential and infrastructure sectors, drove strong demand for limited resources. The quarterly price movements by class were housing construction at 1.1%, other residential building construction at 1.9%, non-residential construction at 1.9%, and the output prices of building construction rose 1.6%, easing from strong growth seen over the past 5 quarters. House construction prices rose 1.1%, and house construction prices rose in December across the quarter, albeit at a slower rate than in recent quarters. The rise was driven by increases in New South Wales, South Australia, and Queensland. And ongoing labour shortages for skilled trades drove price increases this quarter, specifically bricklayers, carpenters, and roofers. A decrease in the Northern Territory due to weaker consumer demand was partially offsetting the increase this quarter. While growth has eased this quarter, house construction prices have risen 17.2% over the past 12 months, and other residential building construction prices rose 1.9%. Other residential construction prices increased this quarter, driven by strong growth in Victoria and South Australia. Supply chain disruptions for imported products, coupled with high demand for finishing stage materials and trades, drove price increases. Ongoing skilled labour shortages placed further pressure on input costs. Over the past 12 months, other residential building construction prices rose 8.1%. Other residential construction prices rose due to skilled labour shortages and high demand for finished stage products. And non-residential construction prices rose 1.9% in the quarter, driven by strong growth in Victoria and South Australia, as material costs continued to be passed through and skilled labour remained in high demand. A decrease in Western Australia due to falling steel prices and reduced costs for beginning stage skilled trades such as masonry and structural construction partially offset the increase this quarter. But over the last 12 months, non-residential building construction prices rose 8.7%, and they rose due to material costs and demand for skilled labour. Heavy and civil engineering construction prices rose 1.4% in the quarter due to increased costs for diesel and strong demand for skilled labour. Road and bridge construction prices rose due to increased costs for concrete and bitumen, driven by high energy and manufacturing costs, coupled with strong global demand and limited supply. And heavy and civil engineering construction rose 9.6% over the past 12 months and up 1.5% due to increased costs for diesel and strong demand for skilled labour. Computer and electronic equipment manufacturing rose 4.2% due to exchange rate impacts, but offsetting those rises were price falls in petroleum refining and petroleum fuel management, down 10% due to a fall in global crude oil prices and a rise in global fuel production. Elsewhere, other agriculture was down 7.4% due to a fall in prices of select commodities as supply levels recovered from flood events during the September quarter. Electricity supply, gas supply and water supply, sewerage and drainage services all were down 2.6% due to a fall in industrial electricity prices following a decrease in wholesale prices. But accommodation services were up 7.6% due to increased demand during spring and summer school holidays, returning international travellers and domestic travellers substituting overseas holidays for domestic holidays. Over the past 12 months, accommodation service prices rose 22.9%. Cafes and restaurants and takeaway food services were up 2% due to higher input costs and wage increases, and they rose 6.4% over the past 12 months. And transport, postal and warehousing prices fell due to rail freight transport dropping 1%, and that was due to pricing adjustments in long-term contracts. Water freight, though, were down 2.1% due to an easing of global supply chain construction. But this was partially offset by road freight transport up 0.7% due to the passing through of rising fuel prices and heavy rain and flooding causing logistical issues. And over the past 12 months, rail freight transport prices rose 5.4%. Water freight transport prices rose 0.3%, and road freight transport rose 12.9%. And information media and telecommunication services fell in December, driven by an increasingly competitive market from the growing presence of online and social media platforms and discounting activity to retain market share. Price falls were recorded in newspapers publishing, down 6.5%, electronic information storage services down 4.5%, magazine and other periodical publishing down 5.2%, but this was partially offset by book publishing up 0.5% due to labour shortages and continued pressure from the high costs of paper, printing, freight and logistics. But over the last 12 months, newspaper publishing fell 3.7%, electronic information storage services fell 0.3%, and magazine and other periodical publishing fell 4.8%. Book publishing, though, rose 0.7%. Information media and telecommunication services fell due to the competitive market conditions. And rental, hiring and real estate service prices rose, driven by non-residential property operators up 1.5% due to further rises in industrial rents as demand for warehouse space in the lead up to Christmas continued amid tight supply. Other goods and equipment rental and hiring were up 1.3% due to increased operating costs being passed on during scheduled price reviews. Passenger car rental and hire were up 5.7% due to increased demand over the holiday period. And over the past 12 months, non-residential property operator prices rose 8%, other goods and equipment rental and hiring prices rose 6.8%, and passenger car rental and hiring rose a massive 30%. Rental, hiring and real estate prices rose due to continued increases in industrial rents, with high professional, scientific and technical services prices driven by legal and accounting services up 0.8% due to increased competition in the skilled labour market, as staff shortages push up wages. Management advice and related consulting services up 0.8% due to sustained demand for services and increased wages to attract and retain staff. Architectural and engineering technical services up 0.2% due to high demand for services from infrastructure programs and labour supply constraints. And over the past 12 months, legal and accounting services prices rose 3.7%, management advice and related consulting services rose at 4%, architectural, engineering and technical services prices rose 3.7%, and professional, scientific and technical services rose due to labour cost pressures. Other service industries rose, driven by hairdressing and beauty services up 2%, due to increased demand during the festive season and increased input costs from being passed on. Laundry and dry cleaning services are at 1.1% due to increased in utility, labour, linen and freight costs. And funeral, crematorium and cemetery services are up 0.9% due to increases in input, labour and maintenance costs. And over the past 12 months, hairdressing and beauty services prices rose 6.1%, laundry and dry cleaning services rose 10.2%, and funeral, cremation and cemetery service prices rose 6.1%. So what you can see here is if you look at that sort of middle layer in the economy between raw input and going to consumers and small businesses, there are huge cost pressures still sitting there in those particular industries, not universally spread. And the point to make here is that some of those price increases will continue to trickle through to end purchasers, be they households or businesses. And this, to me, highlights the likelihood of there being longer periods of higher inflation than many people expect. Because when you take the pulse in the middle of the value chain, as it were, you need to allow months and quarters for those prices to flow through into the retail end of the spectrum. I'm Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Many thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.